Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to paint this mixed media painting. It was so much fun, and if you'd like a real-time tutorial for this, you can find it up now in Critique Club, along with over 150 other tutorials. We're going to start off on watercolor paper with Inktense blocks. Inktense is the perfect base layer for a mixed media piece, because once you add water to it, it will become permanent, and then you can layer up and not have to smear any of that first layer. So that's kind of a fun thing to start with if you're ever confused about what to do first. Now I'm using an orange and blue color scheme here. Those are opposite colors on the color wheel. The cool thing about them is if you put them together next to each other, they make each other seem more vibrant, but if you mix them together, then you're going to get a neutralized color. So I actually used blue for the cup. I mixed blue and orange together to make the gray of the spoon, and then of course oranges and reds and yellows too for the grapefruit slices. It's kind of fun, and I find the more that you paint, the more that you will understand color theory. The color wheel that I just had there is my color wheel through Craftstash. It's like regular price $6. I think it's been on sale for $4, but Craftstash is closing. So if you had your eyes on some things there, I would grab them now, because who knows what the future holds for some of those products. But we shall see. I do have some new things coming up next month, and it'll be on their new website that they're kind of teaming up and merging a couple of their different stores together. So you'll see some of those products as we go along in this video, kind of a sneak peek, and yeah, kind of fun. But honestly, look in your stash and see what you have that's similar. So for the background, I'm taking this kind of like really dark gray and a dusty rose type of Inktense block, and I'm mixing them together. I didn't want just a flat black. I like to mix some colors in there. I just think it makes it look a little bit more interesting. And that way I've got something down. And I find just kind of covering the paper is helpful. You know, you get out of that fear of the blank page, and it just kind of gives you a stepping off point to do some more stuff. So I was thinking that I wanted to do some collage. So I grabbed my bins of like black, white, and cream colored collage papers, and I'm just seeing what I have that might work with this motif. A lot of these collage papers are jelly prints, but some of them are clean off papers where I've like cleaned my brayer or brush on, or I've cleaned mess off of my silicone mat with. I'll just throw them all together, divided by color, and I go by the most predominant color because my papers will have a few different colors on there, so I'll pick the one that seems the most prominent and then kind of sort them that way. I loved how some of this paper looked like a countertop, so I decided to make a pattern of my drawing. So I just took a piece of tracing paper and I traced the outline with a Sharpie, and that's going to be used as a template for when I'm cutting different collage papers. That's a really great way to do it. That way, you know, you can just cut the pieces that you want. You can conserve your paper if you want to. It's kind of a nice tip. And all you're out is a piece of tracing paper. And that tracing paper, I might jelly print on it and use it for something else. Maybe I'll do the painting again, and I will start off with a collage using that as a template. So I taped the paper down to my to the back side of my collage paper, and I taped it down backwards because you can see through the tracing paper, and then I used graphite paper to transfer it. That way I could cut out the design, because it would be really hard to do that on the front side of the paper because it's so glossy and dark. I wouldn't be able to see my lines. So doing this in reverse on the back side of the paper, it allows me to cut out that whole area that I want to be like the countertop. And it just reminded me of granite, just the way it looked. So I'm like, perfect. And I work on a self-healing mat. You know, I every few years I'll get a new one because it'll get just so grungy and gross, but that's really handy, so you don't have to go kind of find a mat when you just need to trim something with a knife. And I do find X-Acto knives are just a great way to get a nice precise little carving. I'm using matte medium as my glue, and I am brushing a coat on the back of the collage paper and also on the the substrate paper, because that will just give me a better bond. I find if I only add glue to the back of the paper or only on the surface of my painting, it just doesn't bond, and I get bubbles and wrinkles, and I was actually just struggling with that today. I knew better, but I didn't have room to put my glue on both. So, you know, but that's the best case scenario. I find that I avoid a lot of wrinkles and bubbles that way. And I wanted to add some interest to the back of the design too. So I decided some painted book pages would work really well. So you may be wondering, how you can amass some collage paper if you don't have anything yet. Well, first look around. Do you have some interesting scrapbooking paper? Do you have some scraps of paper left over from things? Sometimes wrapping paper. I have a little pen that is a pH tester, and I can actually test my paper to see if it's acid free. So if I'm not so sure about something, I can test it before I decide to save it for collage. If you're going to like encapsulate it in matte medium, that is going to give it quite a bit of protection. So it's going to seal out the elements that may make your paper brittle. But I do try to use only acid-free materials just to ensure that my work's not going to get brittle and yellow with time. So this isn't real newspaper. This is actually a wrapping paper that I'm using there. It was when I saved from some gifts from my friend Michelle, who wrapped up a bunch of awesome Japanese stationery for me, and I just loved the papers. And I'm just filling in. And I'm just trying to make an interesting composition. I know where my main focal point is going to be because I've already sketched it in there, but it's not such a precious sketch. It's not rendered. I'm not worried about messing anything up because we're just in the initial phases, right? And I like to tear pieces of paper for two reasons. If the paper's thick, if you tear the paper rather than cutting it, sometimes you have to cut it, like that big piece. I wanted to cut that precisely around my stuff, but a lot of times I tear it because the feathered edges you get from tearing seals it down better. These little orange slices though, I did cut the little pieces out just so they would kind of fit in that area, and I kind of wanted that collage look there. So it just really depends on the type of look I want. If I want to be really collagey and bold looking, then I'll cut it. If I want it to kind of blend into the background, I'll tear the paper. And I keep going back to that template that I made on the tracing paper just to help me cut pieces as well. So yeah, you use whatever is easiest. I bet if you did this a lot, you'd probably be able to eyeball it really well and not even have to, barely hold it up to your image to cut it precisely. When I see people that do like paper piecing all the time, they are so accurate. They can just eyeball it and have their little pieces of paper cut out perfectly, which is really cool. You want to make sure you let that dry before you go over it with another medium, or you could wrinkle up the paper. And I'm going in with tempera sticks. You could use gelatos, you could use gel crayons, you could use gouache. Really, I think the point of a video like this is to try to get you to think outside of the box and see different ways that you can put your supplies together, because we collect supplies. We all have drawers and boxes with supplies in them, and sometimes we don't think about putting them together. So maybe you're looking at this and you're like, oh, I have some gel crayons, or my kids had some gel crayons, or I have some water-soluble oil pastels, or I have some Stabilo Woodies, I have some Neocolor 2s, I have, and think about those different products and how you could use them in place of what I'm using here. I'm trying to get a reflection on the table, kind of like the reference photo that I had. And so I'm just using the tempera sticks, which are kind of translucent, especially on that glossy paper. And some of my papers are quite glossy, because when I let my paper dry on my gel plates so that I can pick up everything on there, they end up having this really slick surface, which is kind of cool. Maybe what you want, it might not be what you want. You can always use Liquitex clear gesso over this whole thing if you decide you want to do some painting or some pastel on top and really have it stick, or some colored pencil on top. I didn't do that for this because I didn't need to, but there's so many things you can do. Mixed media is so interesting, and the more you do it, the more you'll learn what you can layer over different things. Generally, you want to think about the fat over lean rule, or the soft over hard rule. So fat over lean is a term you hear in oil painting, and basically what that means is you put your leaner, thinner layers first, and then you layer up your thicker, more oily layers. And the reason for that is because your leaner layers will dry quicker, and then you won't have some area of your painting off-gassing and still drying while your top film dries. That's how cracking happens. If you've ever accidentally painted acrylic over oil paints, you've probably seen that crackle effect. So that's not what you want typically. And it's very similar with mixed media. You want to put those thinner, drier, quicker drying layers first, and then you want to lay up your thicker, fattier layers. So the things that are going to either never dry or take a long time to dry or never really set, those are going to be your last layers. And that way you're going to have something that's not going to fall apart. You're going to have a surface that's going to support the media that you put on top. And a lot of it comes through experimentation and learning how your different materials behave and react. And I find that once you understand that concept, you start playing with materials, you will learn which ones play well together. And you can usually get most medias to play together if you put them in the right order. Some materials don't play great together. Like I would say, it's funny, the two pastels, like oil pastels, and chalky soft pastels generally do not play well together, but you could, there's ways to make it work. You know, but a lot of times you can get your products to work together. Some products are just a little trickier, like oil paint, for instance. That's one that you don't typically use in mixed media because it takes forever to dry, and plus you need to have a gessoed surface, or the oil paint will eat through the papers and things like that. So, yeah, some mediums are kind of better on their own, but a lot of mediums are great when you can mix them up, especially water-soluble medias. I'm using gouache here, and if you see that palette on the side of my paper, on the side of the screen, that is a Meeden porcelain palette, and that's my studio gouache palette, so I have only light fast colors in that palette. It's for quote-unquote, air quotes, fine art. It's art that I want to make sure it doesn't fade, so art that I might not be doing in a sketchbook, but it's very handy for me just to grab and go with it because they're all artist quality paints. They perform as expected. They're probably a little more translucent than a lot of the designer gouaches, but I really like them. I selected the colors from various brands. Now I'm going in with some more of that dusty rose color and adding it over the collage papers and the background just to kind of unify that a little bit, because I felt that was just everything was too together. I needed to spread it apart. I would need to push it apart. And now here you can see another one of my new products. This is one of my stencils. I have 2 8x8 stencils coming out in the Sketchbook Floozies line, and they are designed so that you can use them in mixed media art like this. You can just take whatever pattern you want. You can repeat it. That way you get 4 designs on each stencil, and you have some nice versatility. And the designs are basic enough or generic enough that you can use them for pretty much any style art you do. Now this is more of the grungy stencil. I have one that's a little bit more damask and a little more, I would say, feminine feeling. And so this one's a little bit more masculine feeling. I like to have those two, like, I don't know, vibes, so that I can kind of use them on anything. I can use one or the other stencil for pretty much adding texture and pattern to any background I have. Now I'm using a roller, just a brayer, to brayer ink onto some stamps, and there you can see it where I just put it on the edge of the frame just to frame it a bit. But I like to do that if I'm kind of cramped for space and I'm doing some mixed media. I want to use acrylic paint on my stamps, because if I use, say, archival ink, it's not going to dry on top of the coated papers. And if I use StazOn, I don't like StazOn. It's a pain in the butt. It's not very predictable. I don't like it. So using acrylic paint as my ink works great. I just have to make sure I clean my stamps afterwards. But I like that because I know it's going to be compatible with everything else I've used here. And speaking of acrylics, I'm using some acrylic markers. These are by Artex. The neat thing about these acrylic brush markers is, well, there's 2 neat things. One, you don't have to start them. They're ready to go. You just got to give them a shake. They're already primed. The other thing is you can unscrew them and you could refill them with your acrylic ink or thin down acrylic paint if you run out of a color, which is great. If you're like me, working at night, living in the country, and you run out of a color, you could mix it up from your acrylic paints and refill it, which I love that. I love products that you can reuse. Or you could buy like acrylic inks with the dropper bottles from different brands and refill them that way. So yeah, there's options, because I mean, a marker's not going to hold a ton of ink. Even a liquid filled marker like this is going to have more ink than one that's got a pad on the inside. It's still not a ton. So being able to refill it really gives these markers more life and makes it so you're not just throwing away plastic when you use them up. So that's something that I think is really neat. The Ohuhu markers do not unscrew, but these are very similar to the Ohuhu brush markers. But yeah, I would say quality-wise you're equivalent, but I do like the fact that I can open that up. And I'm just doing some stippling to get that texture of the grapefruit skin and just add little touches here and there. I find acrylic markers are really nice for this. The downside to most acrylic markers is that they're usually a little bit more pastel-y if they're an opaque marker. So it can be hard to get those really vibrant saturated colors like the fire engine red and the, deep Prussian blue, things like that. Those are generally a little more difficult to find. Ohuhu has some, Posca has some, it just depends. I find the Artex markers tend to be a little bit more opaque, but also a little bit more kind of muted in tone. I use different brands together. The new Copic Acryas, they tend to be a little bit, they have some saturated colors, but a lot of them are pastel too. You know, it's nice just to have a variety. The nice thing about Posca, and I think also Molotow, Liquitex maybe as well, you could buy individual markers. So if you know you need a bright red, you need a rich black, you need an extra white, you can purchase open stock with those brands. Arctics doesn't have open stock. So, you know, you get a less expensive marker with brands like Arctics and a lot of the internet brands like Ohuhu, but you can't just buy one single color. Yet, anyways, maybe they're going to change that. But they're really great for adding touches. They're affordable, and you get a lot in a pack, which is really nice. And I'm just kind of puttering around. Now, I'm giving this a quick little dry, just so I can layer up a little bit more. And I'm kind of liking how it's going here. Now, I needed to have this dry because I want to go over with these crayons. These are the Neo Art 6901 Light Fast crayons by Caran d'Ache. They're a new product. I had to have them as soon as I learned about them. They have dropped in price, so I paid more than you would pay if you went to Blick. Plus, I'll share a couple coupon codes if you do want to buy those, because I think they're still in the sale category. I think they're down to like $2.49 now, but then I've got either a 10 or 15% coupon that you can add on top of that to save a little more. So you'll be buying them for less than I have. And they've dropped the price on their sets too. I really like them. I don't think they're for everyone. They're called a wax oil pastel, but they're not like an oil pastel. They're like a crayon. They're very much like a Neocolor 1. And I was looking at the old discontinued Neocolor 1 colors, and I think a lot of the colors in this line were the same colors they discontinued from the Neocolor 1 line. So if you love your Neo 1s, look at my review I did on these crayons, because I go over where the matches are and what colors are different. So you can just pick out the different colors if you already have the Neo ones, but really wonderful. Now I'm using a white gel pen to do the really sharp glistens on the cut fruit there, just to give it that little shiny bit. And yeah, I love to add a little gel pen at the end. Now, gel pens, I recommend only opening one at a time, because they do have a shelf life. This one's been going for a while. I'm actually surprised at how well that one's held up. It's been a couple of years, and it came in like a set with like watercolors and other things. So you never know. Sometimes you think you've got you're spending top dollar on a gel pen and it doesn't last. And other times you get a cheapo and it like hangs on forever. But yeah, I'm evaluating it at this point, thinking, do I want to add more? And I thought, yeah, I think I want a little bit of a frame. So I'm just going around the edges with this kind of black crayon. If I've added something somewhere, I try to add it elsewhere. And then I decided for a final touch, I'm going to use these wax effects. This is a product by Deco Art, and they're these translucent encaustic looking acrylic paints that you can add to get a little bit of an encaustic look on your mixed media. They're translucent. They'll dry a little bit darker and a little bit sheerer, but it's just kind of a fun way to layer up. It looks good over collage papers too. If you just want a thin veil of color, they're kind of fun. You can just get the natural color and mix it with your acrylic paints and make your own too. So that might be a good way to start if you're not sure if you're going to use them that much. But there you have it. Here is the finished product. I think it turned out really nice. I had so much fun painting it. And if you want a real-time tutorial, make sure you check out Critique Club. I'll have all the details for that in the video description. Thanks for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.